The door slams open so hard the walls shake, and there she is, Mom. Her face is like thunder, eyes sharp as knives. "This?" she barks, pointing at the peeling wallpaper, her voice slicing through the quiet hum of my tiny studio apartment. My chest tightens. I can't breathe. The air smells faintly of stale coffee grounds and wet socks from yesterday's rain-soaked shoes. Her gaze sweeps over my cluttered desk, lingering on the stack of unpaid bills next to half-empty mugs. "You call this living?" She spits out the words like they're poison, each one landing with a sting that makes me want to shrink into the floorboards. I should say something, anything, but all I manage is a weak shrug, my throat dry as sandpaper. That's when it happens. The pipe above us groans, then bursts without warning. Water explodes everywhere, drenching my sketchbooks, the ones I've poured years of heartache and hope into. Panic surges in my chest as cold water soaks my shirt, but worse than that is the look on Mom's face, a mix of horror and disappointment that cuts deeper than any knife ever could. If you're hooked, don't miss what comes next. Subscribe now to hear how I turn this disaster into a chance for redemption, and maybe find forgiveness along the way. This story will stay with you long after it ends. I'm Lila, and if I had to describe myself in one word, it'd be unfinished. At 29, I feel like a patchwork quilt stitched together with scraps of dreams that never quite fit. I work as a barista at a little cafe on the corner of Maplewood's busiest street, pulling espresso shots for people who barely glance up from their phones. But my real passion is art. Well, maybe not passion. Passion sounds too polished, too confident. What I do feels more like clawing at something just out of reach, trying to make sense of a world that often doesn't make room for dreamers like me. My mom? She's complicated. Her name's Carol, though everyone calls her by her full name because she commands respect, or demands it, depending on how you look at it. Mom has always been this towering figure in my life, sharp-tongued, driven, unrelenting. She grew up poor in Detroit, raised by a single mother after my grandfather left when she was 10. That shaped her, I think, made her believe the only way to survive is to push harder than anyone else. To her, success isn't optional, it's survival. And me? I've spent most of my life feeling like I'll never measure up. But here's the thing about Mom. You can't help but love her, even when she hurts you. Beneath all those layers of criticism and expectations, there's a woman who carried so much weight her whole life that she probably forgot how to put it down. She wants me to succeed, sure, but not just because she cares about my happiness. It's deeper than that. It's fear. Fear that I'll end up lost, or worse, stuck, like her. And then there's me, the girl standing ankle-deep in waterlogged sketches, wondering where it all went wrong. I want freedom, but not the reckless kind. I want to create something meaningful, something that makes people feel less alone. But every time I try, doubt creeps in. What if I fail? What if no one cares? Those questions have haunted me since. I was a kid, sitting at the kitchen table while Mom graded papers late into the night, muttering about students who didn't take life seriously enough. There's also Mrs. Patel, my landlord, who pops in occasionally with homemade chai and stories about her grandchildren. She's become an unlikely ally, someone who sees potential in me even when I don't see it myself. And Jake, the guy who fixes bikes down the block. He's sweet, funny, and endlessly patient, though our friendship dances awkwardly around something neither of us wants to name. These people orbit my world, shaping it in ways big and small. Each of them carries pieces of my story, fragments of who I am and who I might become. If you're listening, stay tuned, not just for what happens next, but for why it matters. Because sometimes the hardest battles are fought within, and the people we least expect become the ones who save us. The studio apartment feels like it's breathing with me, though not in a comforting way. It creaks underfoot. the old wood groaning like it's carrying secrets it doesn't want to share. Sunlight filters through the blinds in uneven strips, pooling on the faded carpet like golden ribbons someone forgot to untangle. There's this one spot where the light always lands, right on the edge of my desk. And for some reason, it makes me feel less alone, even when I'm sitting there late at night sketching until my hands ache. But let's be real. The place smells like coffee and regret. Not the cozy kind of coffee either. The burnt, overbrewed stuff that clings to everything if you don't clean the machine often enough, and I don't. The air is thick with it, mingling with the faint metallic tang of rust creeping along the baseboards. Sometimes, when the wind picks up outside, I can hear it whistling through the cracks around the window frame, like the building itself is sighing. Then there's the sound of traffic below, a constant hum punctuated by car horns and distant voices. You'd think it would drive me crazy, but weirdly, it grounds me. It reminds me that life is happening out there, beyond these four walls, even when I feel stuck inside them. My favorite part, though, is the little fire escape just big enough for a chair. On clear nights, I sit out there wrapped in an old quilt, watching the city lights blur together like stars too close to see clearly. Inside, the chaos tells its own story. Sketchbooks pile up like leaning towers, their pages curling at the edges from years of use. Half-empty paint tubes litter the table. Next, there's always a mug or two drying in the sink, or sometimes 5, because who has time to wash dishes when your world feels like it's falling apart? And then there's the radiator, which hisses, unpredictably, loud enough to startle me mid-thought. But honestly, that noise almost feels alive, like the apartment is reminding me it's still here, holding on despite everything. It's not perfect, far from it, but it's mine. Every scuffed floorboard, every stubborn stain, it all holds pieces of me. When Mom walked in that day, she didn't see any of that. All she saw was failure written in peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceilings. What she couldn't know, what no one could, is how much hope lives here too. Hope tucked into the corners, waiting to be found again. If you're listening, stick around. This messy little space holds more than memories. It holds the beginning of something bigger. You ever feel like your whole life is this tug of war between who you want to be and what everyone else expects? Like no matter how hard you try, you're always just a little bit short. Short on money, short on time, short on patience, short on answers? That's me. Every single day. I mean, here I am, 29 years old, living in a studio apartment that's smaller than some people's walk-in closets, working a job where I spend more time cleaning spilled milk off the counter than actually making art, which is supposed to be my thing, my dream. Except it doesn't feel much like a dream anymore. It feels like this heavy weight sitting right on my chest, reminding me every morning that I'm not where I thought I'd be by now. And then there's Mom. Oh, Mom. She loves me. I know she does. But sometimes love looks an awful lot like judgment when it comes from her mouth. This isn't living, she said the other day, gesturing at my place like it was some crime scene instead of the only home I've been able to afford for the past 3 years. And sure, okay, maybe the wallpaper is peeling, and yeah, maybe the pipes groan like they're about to give out any second, but it's mine. Doesn't that count for something? Or is success really just about square footage and bank accounts? Because if it is, then I've already failed. Big time. But here's the thing. It's not just about the apartment or even the unpaid bills stacked next to my bed. It's deeper than that. It's about this chasm between us, this gaping hole filled with years of unspoken words and missed connections. She pushes me because she wants me to succeed, but I can't help wondering, is she pushing me toward something I actually want, or just toward what she thinks I should want? What happens if I don't fit into the mold she's built for me? Does that make me a disappointment? A failure? Sometimes I lie awake at night thinking about all the ways I let her down without even realizing it. And worse, all the ways I might never be able to fix it. Then there's the art. The one thing that's supposed to save me. Except lately it feels like it's drowning me instead. I pour everything I have into those sketches. Every ounce of hope, every shred of fear, every moment of longing for something better. But what do I get back? Rejection letters, crumpled up drafts, half-finished pieces gathering dust because I lost faith halfway through. What's the point of creating something beautiful if no one sees it? Or worse, if someone does see it and hates it? Would you keep going if you were me? If every brushstroke felt like stepping closer to heartbreak? And let's talk about the flood, shall we? Because nothing screams rock bottom, quite like standing ankle-deep in water while your mom watches your dreams literally wash away. Those sketches weren't just paper. They were pieces of me, fragments of who I am and who I could become. Seeing them ruined, it gutted me. But what hurt even more was the look on Mom's face when she found them. Disappointment mixed with pity, like she couldn't decide whether to yell at me or hug me. So she did neither. She just stood there, staring, and let silence fill the space between us. That silence, it's deafening. It asks questions I don't know how to answer. Am I good enough? Will I ever be? Should I stay here in Maplewood, fighting for scraps of happiness, or pack up and chase something bigger, even if it means leaving behind the only person who's ever truly known me? If you were standing in my shoes, soaked to the bone and staring at the wreckage of everything you've worked for, what would you do? Would you fight for forgiveness? For understanding? Or would you run as far and as fast as you could? Because, honestly, I don't know what comes next. All I know is that something has to change. But change means risk, and risk means pain. And pain is the one thing I've spent my whole life trying to avoid. So here I am, stuck between two worlds, two versions of myself, and no idea which way to turn. Stay tuned, though, because whatever happens next, I promise it won't be easy, and neither will figuring out who I really am. Okay, so picture this. I'm standing there in my flooded apartment, water pooling around my ankles like some kind of twisted indoor lake, and all I can think about is how much worse this day could possibly get. Spoiler alert, it gets worse. Way worse. Because while the pipe bursting felt like the universe's cruel joke, it wasn't even close to being the real crisis. No, the real crisis came when Mom bent down to pick up one of my soaked sketchbooks and froze mid-motion. Her face went pale. Not the, oh no, this is bad kind of pale, but the, I've just seen a ghost kind. And honestly, I didn't blame her. Those sketchbooks were supposed to stay hidden, tucked away under piles of half-finished projects and old receipts like they didn't exist. They weren't meant for anyone else's eyes, especially not hers. "Lila," she said, slowly, holding the soggy pages like they might crumble in her hands if she moved too fast. "What is this?" The tone of her voice hit me harder than anything else that had happened that day. It wasn't angry or disappointed. It was confused, lost, like she'd stumbled into a part of me she didn't recognize. And maybe she had. Maybe none of us really knew who I was anymore, least of all me. Here's the thing about those sketches. They weren't just doodles or random ideas thrown onto paper. They were pieces of my soul, raw and unfiltered, every line drawn with trembling, fingers and sleepless nights. Some were bright and hopeful, filled with colors that made you feel alive just looking at them. Others were dark and jagged, full of shadows and sharp edges that cut deeper than any knife ever could. Together, they told a story. A messy, incomplete story, but mine. Seeing Mom hold one of them felt like handing over a piece of myself without permission, exposing something fragile and unfinished to someone who'd spent years telling me I needed to be stronger, better, more polished. But then she flipped through the pages, her expression shifting from shock to something softer, almost tender. "You drew these?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to speak because suddenly I was terrified, not of what she'd say, but of what she wouldn't. Silence has always been louder than words in our family, and right now it was deafening. She traced her finger over one of the sketches, a charcoal portrait of two figures sitting side by side on a fire escape, their faces turned toward the city lights. This is beautiful," she murmured, and for a split second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she finally saw me. Really saw me. Except nothing's ever that simple, is it? As soon as the moment passed, reality came crashing back. She dropped the sketchbook like it burned her hands and straightened up, her shoulders stiffening again. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, her voice rising with each word. "Why have you been hiding this?" And there it was, the question I'd been dreading since she walked through the door. Because how do you explain to someone that you kept your biggest dream locked away because you were afraid they'd laugh at it? Or worse, ignore it completely? "I didn't think you'd care," I shot back, instantly regretting the words as soon as they left my mouth. But it was too late. They hung there between us, heavy and ugly, widening the gap we'd been trying so hard to bridge. Mom flinched like I'd slapped her, and for a second I thought she might cry. Instead, she turned away, pacing the tiny room like a caged animal. "Of course I care," she snapped, though her voice cracked halfway through. "How could you think I wouldn't?" And that's when it hit me, the truth I'd been avoiding all along. This wasn't just about the art or the apartment or even the flood. It was about trust, or lack thereof. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped believing that Mom wanted anything for me other than perfection, or at least her version of it. And she'd stopped believing that I trusted her enough to share the parts of me that mattered most. We were both guilty, both broken, both lost in this endless cycle of misunderstanding and hurt. The water kept rising, creeping closer to the stack of rejection letters on my desk, and I couldn't help but wonder if this was it, if this was the moment. Everything fell apart for good. What would you do if you were me? If you were standing there watching your world collapse under the weight of secrets and lies, knowing you had the power to fix it but terrified of what might happen if you tried? Would you fight for forgiveness, for understanding, or would you let the current carry you away, hoping against hope that somewhere downstream, things might make sense again? Because here's the thing. Crises don't come with roadmaps. There's no guidebook for how to navigate the wreckage of your life when everything you've built starts falling apart. All you can do is take a deep breath, wade into the mess, and hope you find something worth saving before it's too late. Stay tuned, though, because whatever happens next, I promise it won't be easy. And neither will figuring out who I really am. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped. Spinning, Mom stood there in the middle of my flooded apartment, her hands trembling as she held that ruined sketchbook, and something shifted between us. Something fragile, but real. She didn't yell or lecture me about wasted potential this time. Instead, she just stared at the sketches, her face softening in a way I hadn't seen since I was a kid. "These are incredible," she whispered finally, her voice catching on the last word like it hurt to say it out loud. For once, she wasn't criticizing me for falling short. Instead, she sounded almost proud. It was surreal, honestly, like stepping into some alternate reality where Mom and I weren't constantly bumping heads over everything from my career choices to how often I called her back. She started picking up more of the soaked pages, handling them carefully despite the water dripping from her fingers. "Why didn't you tell me you could do this?" she asked again, softer this time, less accusation and more curiosity. And maybe, I don't know, it was the exhaustion talking, or maybe it was the fact that we were both standing ankle-deep in chaos with nowhere else to go, but I actually answered her. "I guess I thought you'd think it was stupid," I admitted, hugging myself tightly because even saying it aloud made me feel exposed, like all those times when I was younger, and you told me art wasn't practical, that I needed to focus on real goals. Remember that? The words came out sharper than I intended, but they hung there between us anyway, heavy with years of unspoken resentment. To my surprise, though, Mom didn't argue. She didn't defend herself or try to explain away the past. She just nodded slowly, her jaw clenched like she was holding back tears, or maybe anger, and said, "I'm sorry. Sorry." 2 little syllables that shouldn't mean much but somehow carried the weight of an entire lifetime. I wanted to believe her. God, I really did. But forgiveness isn't something you can just hand over like spare change. It's messy, and complicated and full of questions you're too scared to ask. Questions like, was she really sorry? Or was she just saying it because she felt guilty? Did she mean it enough to change? Or would things go right back to the way they were the second the water dried up? Still, for a while, it felt like we were okay. We worked together to salvage what we could. The sketches, the books, anything that hadn't been completely destroyed by the flood. Mom rolled up her sleeves and got down on her hands and knees, scrubbing at the stains on the carpet like she was determined to erase every trace of the disaster. Watching her, I couldn't help but wonder if she was trying to clean up more than just the mess in my apartment. Maybe she was trying to fix us too. By the time evening rolled around, the place looked less like a war zone and more like, well, still a disaster, but a slightly less catastrophic one. Mom made tea using the last of my chamomile bags and sat, cross-legged on the floor next to me, sipping hers quietly while I flipped through the salvaged sketches. Neither of us said much, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It felt peaceful, almost hopeful. Like maybe we'd turned a corner, found some kind of truce in the wreckage. But then she noticed something. A crumpled envelope sticking out from under the desk, half hidden by a pile of soggy papers. She reached for it before I could stop her, pulling it free and smoothing it open. Her eyes scanned the letter inside, her expression darkening with each line. "What's this?" she asked sharply, holding it up so I could see. It was one of the rejection letters, from a gallery I'd applied to months ago, hoping against. Hope that someone would finally take a chance on me. Someone who wasn't family. I tried to play it off, shrugging like it didn't matter. "Just junk mail," I lied, reaching for the letter, but she pulled it away before I could grab it. "This isn't junk mail," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "This is proof that you've been hiding even more than I realized." And just like that, the fragile peace we'd built shattered. Because deep down, I knew she was right. There were still secrets between us. Things I hadn't told her, things I wasn't sure I ever could. What happens when she finds out? Will she understand? Or will she decide I'm not worth the effort after all? Stay tuned, if you think. This is resolved, trust me, it's only getting started. Just when I thought we were making progress. Just when I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, Mom and I could actually fix things between us, the second crisis hit like a freight train. And this one wasn't about leaky pipes or soggy sketchbooks. No, this time it was personal. Really personal. The kind of blow-up that leaves scars you can't see but feel every single day. It started innocently enough. Or as innocent as anything involving rejection letters can be. After she found that crumpled envelope under the desk, Mom didn't stop there. Oh no, she went digging deeper, rifling through piles of papers like she was on some kind of mission to uncover every secret I'd ever buried. At first, I tried to stop her, grabbing at her hands and muttering lame excuses like, "You don't need to look at those," or "They're not important." But Mom has always been relentless, and once she sets her mind to something, there's no stopping her. That's how she found the rest of them. A whole stack of rejection letters from galleries and competitions I'd applied to over the years. Some were polite form responses. Others were brutal rejections that cut right to the bone. Each one stung more than the last. Not because they told me I wasn't good enough, they did, but because they reminded me of all the times I'd convinced myself I didn't matter. That art wasn't worth pursuing. That maybe Mom was right. After all. She read them out loud, her voice shaking with anger. Or maybe sadness. I couldn't tell which. "Your work shows promise but lacks cohesion," she recited from one letter, her tone clipped and sharp. Then another. "We regret to inform you." On and on she went, each word landing like a punch to the gut. By the time she reached the last one, tears were streaming down my face, though I tried to hide them by turning away and pretending to tidy up the already cleaned mess around us. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded finally, slamming the stack of letters onto the table so hard it made me jump. Her eyes were wild, searching mine for answers I didn't have. "Do you know how hard it is to watch you give up on yourself without saying a word? Do you think I don't care?" And that's when I lost it. All the frustration, all the hurt, all the years of biting my tongue boiled over in an instant. "Give up on myself?" I shot back, my voice cracking under the weight of everything I'd been holding inside. "You've been telling me to give up since I was 12. Remember that? When I brought home my first art award and you said, 'Don't get too attached, it's not a real career.' Or when I begged you to let me take extra classes in high school and you told me to focus on math instead. How am I supposed to trust you now when you spent years tearing me down?" The room went silent, except for the sound of both of us breathing heavily, adrenaline coursing through our veins like wildfire. For a moment, I thought she might cry, or yell, or walk out the door and never come back. Instead, she sank onto the edge of the bed, her shoulders slumping like the fight had drained out of her. "I didn't mean to tear you down," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I meant to protect you." Protect me? From what? From failure? From heartbreak? From the possibility that chasing dreams might leave me empty-handed? Because if that's what protection looks like, then maybe I didn't want it. Maybe none of us do. What would you do in my shoes? If someone who claimed to love you spent your whole life steering you away from the very thing that made you feel alive, would you forgive them? Or would you walk away before they could hurt you again? But here's the thing about crises. They don't resolve themselves neatly. Even as Mom sat there, looking smaller and frailer than I'd ever seen her, I couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation was far from over. There was still so much unsaid, so many questions lingering in the air like storm clouds waiting to burst. What happens when the person who's supposed to love you unconditionally doesn't understand you at all? And worse, what happens when you realize you've been blaming them for choices you made yourself? Stay tuned, because whatever comes next, I promise it won't be easy. And neither will figuring out whether forgiveness is even possible or worth it. You ever have one of those moments where you're forced to choose between two impossible options, knowing full well that no matter what you pick, someone or something is going to break? That's exactly where I found myself the next morning. The air in my tiny apartment felt heavier than usual, like the walls were closing in on me along with all the decisions I'd been avoiding for years. Mom had left late last night after our blowout fight, slamming the door behind her so hard the frame rattled. But she didn't stay gone for long. By sunrise, she was back, standing outside my building with a cardboard box in her arms and this look on her face that said she wasn't leaving until we figured things out. Inside the box, art supplies. Expensive ones, professional-grade brushes, tubes of paint still sealed, sketchbooks with thick, creamy pages that made my hands itch just looking at them. I thought maybe, if you're serious about this, she started, setting the box down gently like it might explode if handled too roughly. You could use these. Start fresh. Her voice wavered, unsure, like she was testing the waters before diving in head first. And part of me wanted to hug her right then and there, because for once she wasn't dismissing my dreams or telling me to focus on something practical. She was meeting me halfway, or at least trying to. But here's the catch. Tucked inside the box was an envelope, a check, made out to me for more money than I'd seen in months. Enough to cover rent, groceries, art supplies, everything. Except, it wasn't just a gift. It came with strings attached. Strings that tied straight into the heart of who I am and what I value most. This isn't charity, Mom clarified quickly, as if reading my hesitation. It's an investment. In you, but only if you promise to stop working at the cafe and dedicate yourself fully to your art. No distractions. Just focus. On paper, it sounded perfect, like the kind of opportunity people dream about but never actually get. Except nothing about this felt simple. Because taking that money meant giving up the one thing that's kept me grounded all these years. My independence. See, the cafe job might suck sometimes, but it's mine. It pays the bills, sure, but it also gives me structure, routine, a sense of purpose outside of art. Without it, would I lose myself completely in the chaos of trying to make it? Or worse, would accepting Mom's help make me feel like I owed her something, like I needed to prove myself to her even more than I already do? What happens when gratitude turns into obligation? Is it still a gift if it comes with conditions? And then there's the other side of the dilemma, the moral weight of saying no. If I turned down the check, what message would that send? Would Mom see it as rejection, proof that I don't trust her or believe in her intentions? Or would she respect me more for standing my ground, even if it meant struggling on my own? Either way, someone gets hurt. Me, her, us. It's like picking which limb to cut off to save the body. But here's the kicker. Deep down, I know this isn't really about the money or the art supplies. It's about control, about whose vision of success gets to win. If I take the check, does that mean I'm letting Mom dictate my life again? Trading one form of pressure for another? Or is it possible to accept her help without losing myself in the process? What would you do if you were me? If someone offered you everything you've ever wanted, but at the cost of who you are? The hardest part is that there's no clear answer. Every choice feels wrong, every path littered with landmines waiting to detonate. Say yes, and I risk losing my autonomy, becoming the person Mom wants me to be instead of the one I'm still trying to figure out. Say no, and I risk pushing her further away, proving her fears right, that I'll never take my future seriously enough to succeed. Neither option feels fair, neither feels safe, and yet I have to decide. Soon. Mom stood there watching me, her eyes searching mine for some sign of what I was thinking. For a moment, I wondered if she felt torn too. If offering me this lifeline felt as complicated for her as accepting it did for me. Maybe she saw herself in me, caught between wanting to protect me and needing to let me go. Or maybe she just wanted to fix things, to rewrite the past by fixing the present. Whatever her reasons, they didn't make my decision any easier. Stay tuned, though, because whatever happens next, I promise it won't be easy. And neither will figuring out whether love means taking what's offered or walking away before it costs too much. Let me tell you something about pressure. It doesn't build slowly, not really. Sure, it starts small, like the faint hiss of steam escaping from a kettle, but then it grows louder, sharper, until suddenly you realize the lid's about to blow off and take everything with it. That's where I was when the fourth crisis hit, the kind that makes your chest tighten and your thoughts race so fast you can barely keep up. It wasn't just one thing. It was everything, all at once, crashing down on me like a tidal wave I couldn't outrun. So here's what happened. After days of agonizing over Mom's offer, those shiny new art supplies sitting untouched in their box mocking me every time I glanced at them, I finally made my decision. I told her no. Not because I didn't want the help or the chance to focus solely on my art, but because accepting it felt like admitting defeat. Like saying, "You were right all along, Mom. I can't do this on my own." And maybe she was. Right. But damn it, I needed to believe I wasn't entirely wrong either. Her reaction? Well, let's just say it wasn't what I expected. Instead of yelling or storming out, which honestly would have been easier, she went eerily quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavier than any argument ever could. She nodded once, stiffly, like she'd already known what my answer would be before I even said it, then turned and walked out without another word. No goodbye, no reassurance, nothing. Just silence. And for a while, I thought that was it. That we'd reached the end of whatever fragile connection we'd been trying to rebuild. But life has this funny way of twisting the knife just when you think you've pulled it out. 2 days later, I got an email, an acceptance letter from a gallery in Chicago. One of the big ones, the kind artists dream about getting but never actually expect will happen. They wanted me to showcase my work in a group exhibition next month. A real opportunity, the kind that could change everything if I played my cards right. Except, it was in Chicago, 3 hours away by train, which might as well have been 3,000 miles given how much I'd been struggling just to stay afloat in Maplewood. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, rereading the email over and over until the words blurred together. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for, the validation I'd craved for years. But instead of feeling excited, I felt sick, because leaving meant more than packing a suitcase and hopping on a train. It meant saying goodbye to the life I'd built here. The cafe, the landlord who brought me chai when I was having a rough day, Jake and his endless supply of terrible jokes, even Mom, who drove me crazy, but also reminded me that someone out there still cared enough to fight for me. Leaving meant starting over, risking everything I'd worked for on the hope that this one chance might lead somewhere better. And then there was Mom. Of course, there was Mom. When I called her to share the news, half hoping she'd congratulate me, half bracing myself for disappointment, she sounded distant. Quiet again, but not in the same way as before. More like she was holding herself together by sheer force of will. "That's great, Lila," she said after a long pause, her voice flat and hollow. "Really great." But she didn't ask when the show was, or if she could come see it. She didn't say anything else at all, actually. Just hung up after a quick, "Take care of yourself," leaving me staring at the phone like it had betrayed me somehow. The worst part? I couldn't blame her. If our roles were reversed, if she'd been the one walking away after everything we'd been through, I'd feel abandoned too. Betrayed even. What kind of person leaves behind the people who love them most, especially when those people are already struggling to hold on? Is chasing a dream worth losing the connections that ground you? Or is staying put just another form of giving up? And yet, how could I turn this down? How could I look at that acceptance letter and tell myself, "No, thanks. I'll stay here instead"? What happens if I pass up this opportunity and spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been? Would I resent Mom for making me feel guilty about leaving? Or would I resent myself for letting fear dictate my choices? Every option came with its own kind of pain, its own set of consequences I wasn't sure I was ready to face. Stay and risk regretting it forever. Leave and risk breaking the bond I'd spent years trying to repair. Either way, something or someone was going to break. And the clock was ticking, louder and faster with each passing second. Stay tuned, though, because whatever happens next, I promise it won't be easy. And neither will figuring out whether dreams are worth the cost of the people who helped shape them. You know that feeling when you're standing on the edge of something huge, staring into the abyss, and every fiber of your being is screaming at you to turn back before it's too late? That's where I was, right there on the precipice, teetering, between two impossible choices, knowing full well that no matter which way I fell, I'd never be able to undo the damage. The clock ticked louder with each passing second, a relentless countdown to a decision I wasn't sure I could live with It had been 3 days since Mom hung up on me after hearing about the gallery show in Chicago. 3 long, agonizing days of silence from her end and sleepless nights for me, replaying our last conversation over and over in my head like some broken record I couldn't shut off. She hadn't called or texted, not even to ask how preparations were going or if I needed help packing. Nothing. It was like she'd already written me off, like my choice to leave was proof she'd been right all along, that I'd abandon her, just like Dad did. Only, I wasn't leaving because I didn't care. I was leaving because I cared, because this was my shot, maybe my only one, to prove to myself and to her that I wasn't wasting my life. But try explaining that to someone who equates love with staying close, whose entire world revolves around holding on so tight she forgets what happens when you let go. Meanwhile, the pressure kept mounting. Every time I looked at the acceptance letter pinned to my wall, it felt less like a victory and more like a demand, a challenge I wasn't sure I was strong enough to face. Could I really pull this off? What if I got to Chicago and froze up, unable to deliver the kind of work that would make people take me seriously? What if the critics hated me, or worse, ignored me completely? And then there was the practical side of things. How would I afford the trip, let alone the materials I'd need to prepare new pieces for the show? Jake offered to lend me money, but accepting felt wrong somehow, like I'd be trading one form of guilt for another. As much as I appreciated his support, I didn't want to owe anyone, not him, not Mom, not anyone. But here's the thing about pressure. It doesn't just push you toward action. It forces you to confront everything you've been avoiding. Like the fact that I still hadn't told Mom about the other letter hidden under my mattress. The one I'd found while cleaning out the apartment earlier that week. It was addressed to her, sent months ago by a lawyer representing Dad. Apparently, he'd resurfaced after years of radio silence, wanting to reconnect. Or at least that's what the vague wording suggested. I hadn't shown it to her yet because, well, honestly, I was scared. Scared of what it might mean for her, for us, for whatever fragile connection we'd been trying to rebuild these past few weeks. But now, staring down the barrel of my own departure, I couldn't ignore it any longer. If I left without telling her, wouldn't that make me just as guilty of running away as he was? And then there was the fire escape. The one place I always went to clear my head when everything inside felt like it was spinning out of control. Except tonight, sitting out there wrapped in an old quilt, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was running out of time. Not just for the gallery show or for fixing things with Mom, but for figuring out who I really am beneath all the layers of doubt and fear and expectation. Who gets to decide what success looks like anyway? Is it Mom, with her rigid ideas of stability and security? Or is it me, chasing a dream that feels equal parts exhilarating and terrifying? And what happens if I realize too late that I've been fighting for the wrong thing all along? If you're wondering whether I'll find a way to reconcile with Mom before it's too late, or if I'll discover the courage to step onto that train and chase the life I've always wanted, you won't want to miss what comes next. This story isn't just about art or family. It's about finding yourself when everyone else is telling you who to be. Subscribe now to hear how far I'll go to rewrite my future, and whether forgiveness can heal the wounds of the past. Stay tuned, because whatever happens next, I promise it won't be easy. And neither will deciding whether love means holding on or letting go. The morning of my departure came too fast, like the universe had conspired to speed up time just to punish me for hesitating. I woke up with a knot in my stomach so tight it felt like my insides were twisting into knots. My bags were packed, or at least as packed as they could be without me feeling like I was leaving behind pieces of myself. And the train ticket sat on the counter next to the acceptance letter, mocking me like some kind of ultimatum. Go or stay. Chase your dream or face the wreckage you're leaving behind. Every second that ticked by made the decision harder, not easier. I hadn't seen Mom since our last phone call 3 days ago, but I knew she'd show up. She always does. Even when she's furious or hurt or pretending she doesn't care, something told me this moment wasn't going to pass without her making an appearance. And sure enough, right as I was dragging my suitcase out the door, there she was. Standing on the sidewalk below my building, arms crossed tightly over her, chest like she was trying to hold herself together. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes, those betrayed everything. They were red-rimmed, puffy, like she'd been crying all night. Or maybe for days. Seeing her like that nearly broke me before. We even exchanged a word. "Lila," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "We need to talk." And just like that, the dam burst. All the words I'd been holding back, the apologies, the explanations, the raw, unfiltered truth, came pouring out of me faster than I could control them. "I'm sorry. Okay?" I blurted, tears already streaming down my face. "I'm sorry if you think I'm abandoning you, because I'm not. I swear I'm not. This isn't about running away. It's about running toward something, for once. Do you know what it's like to feel like you've spent your whole life waiting for permission to exist? Like no matter how hard you try, nothing you do is ever good enough? That's what it feels like being around you sometimes, Mom. Like I'll never measure up." She flinched like I'd slapped her, but I couldn't stop now. Not after keeping all of this bottled up for years. And yeah, maybe taking off to Chicago makes me selfish, but staying here and letting you keep telling me who to be feels worse. Because what happens if I wake up 10 years from now and realize I wasted my chance to figure out who I am? Would you even understand that? For a moment, she just stood there, frozen, staring at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Then, slowly, she uncrossed her arms and took a step closer, her voice trembling when she finally spoke. "Do you really think I don't want you to succeed?" she asked, quieter now, almost pleading. "Do you think I push you because I don't believe in you? Lila, I push you because I'm terrified of losing you." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the air out of my lungs. Terrified of losing me? How could she possibly think I'd leave her behind when all I've ever wanted was to make her proud? But then she kept talking, and everything shifted again. "You're not the only one who's scared," she admitted, her voice breaking under the weight of years of unspoken pain. "I see so much of myself in you, all that fire, all that passion, and it scares me because I know what happens when dreams fall apart. I gave up painting because I thought it would protect me from getting hurt, but instead, it left me empty, hollow. And now you're standing here, ready to throw yourself into the same fire. And all I can think about is how much it'll break you if things don't work out." It was like hearing her for the first time, not as the critical perfectionist mom who'd spent years telling me what I needed to do, but as a woman who'd sacrificed parts of herself to survive. A woman who loved me so fiercely she couldn't bear the thought of watching me fail. Suddenly, all the fights, all the arguments, all the times she'd pushed me to focus on real goals made sense. She wasn't trying to crush my spirit. She was trying to shield me from the kind of pain she'd carried her whole life. But understanding her didn't make my choice any easier. If anything, it made it harder. Because now I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for both of us. For her freedom to let go, and for mine to move forward. "So what do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How do we fix this?" Mom sighed, running a hand through her hair like she was exhausted but determined. "Maybe we start by trusting each other," she said softly. "You trust me to support you, even if it's hard. And I trust you to find your way, even if it leads somewhere I don't fully understand." We stood there for what felt like forever, neither of us saying anything else, but somehow knowing everything had changed. The train whistle blew in the distance, reminding me that time was running out. I looked at Mom one last time, searching her face for some sign of what to do next. Should I stay? Should I go? What happens if I choose wrong? Stay tuned, because whatever happens next, I promise it won't be easy. And neither will figuring out whether love means holding on or letting go. Just as I was about to grab my suitcase and head toward the train station, something stopped me. A sound so unexpected it froze me in my tracks. It wasn't the whistle of the approaching train or even Mom's voice calling after me. It was laughter. Real, genuine laughter. The kind that bubbles up uncontrollably and makes your chest ache because you haven't heard it in years. I turned around slowly, confused, only to see Mom standing there clutching a paintbrush. She held it like it might bite her, but there was no mistaking what she intended to do next. Without saying a word, she walked over to the side of the building, where graffiti had long since faded into smudges of gray and black. Then, with a deep breath and a look on her face that said she was either crazy or desperate, she dipped the brush into a can of leftover paint Jake had left outside months ago and started drawing. At first, I thought she'd lost her mind. Like, completely snapped under the pressure of everything we'd been through. But then I saw it. Shapes emerging from the chaos. Bold strokes turning into figures. Colors blending into something surprisingly beautiful. A mother and daughter, sitting side by side under a sky full of stars. The scene looked eerily familiar. It was almost identical to one of my sketches. The same charcoal portrait Mom had traced her fingers over during the flood. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. "You hate painting." She didn't stop working, though her hands trembled slightly as she added more detail. "I don't hate it," she corrected softly. "I gave it up because I was scared. Scared of failing, scared of feeling anything. But watching you fight for your dreams made me realize something." She paused, finally looking up at me with tears streaming down her face. "If I can't let myself dream again, how can I expect you to?" The words hit me like a lightning bolt, knocking the air out of my lungs. This wasn't just some random act of rebellion. It was an apology, a gift, a promise that she wasn't giving up on us or on herself. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. All those arguments, all those years of pushing me away while pulling me closer, they weren't about control or disappointment. They were about fear. Fear of losing me, yes, but also fear of becoming someone who couldn't dream anymore. But here's the twist, the part that changed everything. As Mom finished the mural, a man appeared at the edge of the sidewalk, hesitating like he wasn't sure if he should approach. He looked older than I remembered, his hair streaked with silver, but there was no mistaking those eyes. Those were Dad's eyes. "Carol?" he called out tentatively, his voice barely audible over the distant rumble of traffic. Mom froze mid-stroke, the paintbrush slipping from her fingers and clattering to the ground. For a moment, neither of them moved, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, quietly, painfully, Mom whispered two words that shattered whatever fragile peace we'd built. "You came back." And just like that, the world shifted on its axis. Everything I thought I knew about our family, about Mom's pain, about why she pushed me so hard, it all unraveled in an instant. Because this wasn't just about me leaving for Chicago anymore. This was about secrets buried too deep, wounds reopened, and choices none of us were prepared to make. If you're wondering whether I got on that train, or if Mom forgave Dad after all these years, you won't want to miss what happens next. Stories like this remind us that life is messy, unpredictable, and full of surprises we never see coming. Subscribe now to hear how far courage can take us when forgiveness feels impossible. Stay tuned, because whatever happens next, I promise it won't be easy, and neither will deciding who deserves a second chance, and who doesn't. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen on the sidewalk, watching Mom and Dad face each other like two strangers meeting for the first time. Maybe seconds. Maybe hours. Time didn't exist anymore. It was just us, suspended in this moment that felt too big to fit inside one lifetime. The paintbrush lay forgotten on the ground beside Mom's half-finished mural, its bright colors stark against the cracked concrete. Neither of them said anything at first. They just stared, taking each other in like ghosts brought back to life. Then Dad took a hesitant step forward, his hands trembling slightly as he reached out, not toward her, but toward the mural. "This is incredible," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "It's you." He glanced at Mom then, his eyes searching hers for something. Forgiveness, recognition, anything. But all she did was nod once, stiffly, like she couldn't trust herself to speak yet. The train whistle blew again in the distance, sharp and insistent, snapping me out of my daze. My ticket was still clutched in my hand, crumpled now from being squeezed so tight. Everything inside me screamed to run, to get on that train and escape before things got even messier than they already were, but I didn't move. How could I? This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about them. About us. And somehow, in the chaos of it all, I realized something. Running wouldn't fix anything. Not really. Because no matter where I went, the questions would follow me. Who am I without the people who shaped me? Can I forgive them for their mistakes if I can't forgive myself for mine? So instead of leaving, I stayed. I watched as Dad knelt down beside the mural, tracing the painted figures with his fingertips like he was trying to memorize every detail. "You always had such talent," he said quietly, his voice breaking on the last word. "I should have told you that more often." Mom finally looked at him then, her expression unreadable but her eyes shining with tears. "Why now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "After all these years, why come back?" He hesitated clearly, struggling to find the right words. "Because I miss you," he admitted finally, his voice raw with honesty. "Both of you. I messed up, I know that. But I'm tired of running away from the people who matter most. If there's any chance we can start over." His voice trailed off, leaving the question hanging in the air between them. For a moment, I thought Mom might say no, that she'd shut him out completely, the way she'd done for years. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Just once. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. And that's when it hit me. Forgiveness isn't something you give someone else. It's something you give yourself. All those years I'd been waiting for Mom to tell me I was good enough, smart enough, brave enough to chase my dreams. But, standing there, watching her take the first shaky steps toward healing, not just with Dad, but with herself, I realized I didn't need her permission anymore. I never had. That doesn't mean it was easy. Leaving for Chicago still felt like stepping off a cliff into the unknown. But when I finally boarded the train later that day, I carried something new with me. Clarity. Clarity about who I am, what I want, and why it matters. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of hope that the people I left behind would find their own way forward too. As the train pulled away from the station, I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window and let myself cry. Not because I was sad, but because I was free. Free to fail, free to succeed, free to figure out who I am without needing anyone else to define me. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was real, and sometimes that's enough. What about you? When was the last time you faced a choice that forced you to grow in ways you didn't expect? How do you decide which parts of your past to carry with you, and which to leave behind? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because transformation isn't a solo journey. We learn best when we share our stories. Stay tuned, because whatever happens next, I promise it won't be easy. And neither will figuring out whether love means holding on or letting go. By the time the train rattled into Chicago, I felt like a different person. Not entirely healed, but lighter somehow. Like the weight I'd been carrying for years had finally shifted enough to let me breathe. The city greeted me with its usual chaos. Honking horns, bustling crowds, and skyscrapers that seemed to scrape the clouds right out of the sky. It was overwhelming in the best possible way, a reminder that life doesn't stop moving, even when you do. And neither could I. The gallery show was everything I dreamed it would be, and more. Walking into that space for the first time, seeing my work displayed under soft lighting that made every line and color pop, felt surreal. People actually stopped to look at my pieces, leaning in close to study the details or stepping back to take in the bigger picture. Some nodded approvingly, others whispered quietly to their companions. One woman even teared up while staring at a charcoal sketch of two figures sitting side by side on a fire escape, the same one Mom had traced her fingers over during the flood. When she caught me watching, she smiled softly and said, "This reminds me of home." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and smiled back, feeling something deep inside crack open and spill over. But here's the thing about success. It doesn't erase your past. No matter how many compliments I received or how many business cards people handed me after the show, part of me still wondered if any of it mattered without the people who shaped me there to see it. Would Mom have been proud? Would Dad have understood why I poured so much of myself into these pieces? Or would they have thought I was chasing something fleeting, temporary, destined to fade as quickly as it appeared? That's why, when I got back to Maplewood a week later, I wasn't surprised to find Mom waiting for me outside my apartment building. She looked different somehow. Calmer, softer, like some invisible burden had lifted from her shoulders. In her hands, she held a small canvas wrapped loosely in brown paper. "I made this for you," she said simply, holding it out like it might shatter if handled too roughly. Inside was a painting unlike anything I'd ever seen her create before. It wasn't polished or perfect. In fact, it was messy in all the best ways, but it was unmistakably hers. The scene depicted a crowded train platform, with tiny figures rushing past each other in every direction. At the center stood a young woman dragging a suitcase behind her. Her face turned toward the horizon like she was searching for something beyond the frame. It was me. Me leaving, but also me coming back. Somehow Mom had captured both sides of the journey in a single image. "I wanted to remind you," she said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "that no matter where you go or what you achieve, this will always be your starting point, your foundation." Her voice wavered slightly, but she kept going. And maybe forgiveness works the same way. You can leave, but you can also return, over and over again. I couldn't speak through the lump in my throat, so instead, I hugged her tightly, letting the tears fall freely onto her shoulder. For once, she didn't pull away or tell me to toughen up. Instead, she held me just as tightly, rocking us gently like she used to when I was little and scared of thunderstorms. In that moment, I realized something important. Forgiveness isn't linear. It doesn't happen once and then disappear. It's a cycle, a process, a choice we make daily, to stay connected, even when staying feels impossible. Later that evening, Dad joined us for dinner at the cafe where I used to work. It was awkward at first, like none of us knew quite how to act around each other anymore. But eventually the conversation flowed easier. We laughed about old memories, shared new ones, and cautiously tiptoed around the cracks we were still learning to mend. By the end of the night, I found myself thinking about something Jake had once said to me. Families aren't perfect. They're just collections of broken people trying to fix each other. He wasn't wrong. None of us were fixed yet. Not completely, but we were trying. That's what mattered most. So here's the resolution, plain and simple. I didn't lose myself in Chicago, and I didn't lose my family either. Instead, I found a way to bridge the gap between them, to honor where I came from while reaching for where I wanted to go. Life is messy, unpredictable, and full of contradictions, just like art. But maybe that's the beauty of it. Maybe the imperfections are what make it worth fighting for. Stay tuned, because whatever happens next, I promise it won't be easy. And neither will figuring out whether love means holding on or letting go. Things didn't magically fix themselves after that night at the cafe. Let's get that straight right now. If anything, life got messier before it got better. But messy isn't always bad, you know? Sometimes it's just real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were finally dealing with the truth, instead of hiding behind half-truths and silent resentments. Mom started painting again, not just for me, but for herself. At first, she kept it quiet, sneaking off to her room late at night with canvases and brushes like she was afraid someone might catch her. But then one day, she showed up at my apartment, unannounced, typical mom move, with a stack of new pieces tucked under her arm. "I need your opinion," she said, her voice wavering slightly as she laid them out across the floor. They weren't perfect. Some were rough around the edges, others still figuring themselves out, but they were hers. Every brushstroke carried years of pain and longing and hope, all mixed together into something raw and beautiful. Watching her rediscover this part of herself made me realize how much she'd sacrificed. Not just for me, but for survival. She wasn't just learning to paint again. She was learning to dream without fear. Dad, on the other hand, took longer to adjust. He came over more often, awkwardly lingering in doorways or offering to help with odd jobs around the house, like he wasn't sure what else to do with his hands. Mom tolerated him, at least at first, but there were moments when their old wounds surfaced, sharp and unrelenting. One evening, during another family dinner at the cafe, Dad brought up the mural Mom had painted outside my building. "It's amazing," he said earnestly, leaning forward like he wanted to say more but didn't know how. "You've always been so talented." Instead of smiling or thanking him, Mom stiffened visibly, her fork clattering against her plate. "Don't act like you noticed," she shot back, her voice tight with anger. "You left before I even picked up a brush." The air went tense, heavy with unsaid words, until finally Dad nodded slowly and whispered, "You're right. I should have stayed." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mom sighed, rubbing her temples like she was trying to push away a headache. "Maybe neither of us is blameless," she admitted softly, her gaze dropping to the table. "But maybe we don't have to be perfect to start over." That conversation stuck with me, not because it solved everything, but because it proved they were both willing to try. Forgiveness doesn't happen overnight, especially not between people who've spent decades hurting each other. But every small step mattered. Every shared meal, every hesitant apology, every laugh that broke through the tension, it all added up to something bigger than any of us could have imagined. As for me, well, Chicago changed me in ways I'm still processing. The gallery show opened doors I didn't know existed, introducing me to artists and mentors who challenged me to think differently about my work. Some encouraged me to experiment with bolder colors. Others pushed me to dig deeper into the emotions behind each piece. For the first time, I stopped worrying about whether my art was good enough and started focusing on whether it was honest. That shift alone felt revolutionary. But the biggest change wasn't external. It was internal. I stopped waiting for approval from anyone, including Mom. Instead, I learned to trust myself, to believe that my voice mattered even if it shook sometimes. It sounds simple, but it wasn't. Letting go of the need to prove myself freed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Suddenly, I wasn't just creating art. I was living it, Jake noticed the difference too. "You seem lighter," he commented one afternoon while helping me pack up supplies for a new project. "Like whatever weight you've been carrying finally lifted." I smiled, knowing exactly what he meant. "Maybe it did," I replied. "Or maybe I just figured out how to carry it better. The truth is, none of us are the same people we were before." Mom found her courage again. Dad learned to stay instead of run. And I discovered that chasing dreams doesn't mean leaving love behind. It means finding a way to take it with you. Life is still complicated, sure, but isn't that the point? We're all just broken pieces trying to fit together, hoping against hope that somehow we'll make something whole. Stay tuned, because whatever happens next, I promise it won't be easy. And neither will figuring out whether love means holding on or letting go. Looking back now, I can see how much this whole journey has taught me. Not just about art or family, but about life itself. It's funny, isn't it? How the hardest lessons are often the ones that stick with you the longest. Like the fact that forgiveness isn't something you give someone else, it's something you give yourself. For years, I carried around this invisible weight, waiting for Mom to tell me I was good enough, smart enough, brave enough to chase my dreams. But standing there on that train platform, watching her paint again after decades of silence, I realized she'd been carrying her own weight too. All those arguments, all those years of pushing me away while pulling me closer. They weren't just about control or disappointment. They were about fear. Fear of losing me, yes, but also fear of becoming someone who couldn't dream anymore. And then there's Dad, this man who left when I was 10 and came back like a ghost from the past, hoping we'd let him in. At first, I didn't know what to do with him. Part of me wanted to shut him out completely, to protect Mom and myself from whatever pain he might bring back. But another part of me, the part that learned to trust through trial and error, knew shutting him out wouldn't fix anything either. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward even when the past still hurts. Watching Mom and Dad stumble their way toward reconciliation made me realize something important. People aren't perfect. They mess up. They run away. They come back. And sometimes they try again, even when trying feels impossible. But here's the thing, no one tells you about growth. It doesn't happen in isolation. You can't heal alone, not really. Sure, I could have gone to Chicago, chased my dreams, and pretended everything at home didn't matter. But would I have been happy? Would I have felt whole? Probably not. Because as much as I wanted independence, I needed connection too. I needed the messy, imperfect love of the people who shaped me to remind me where I came from and why it mattered. That's why I think the biggest lesson here is about balance, about finding a way to honor your roots while reaching for the sky. Too often we're told we have to choose, stay or go, hold on or let go, follow your heart or play it safe. But life isn't binary, it's a spectrum, a juggling act. Sometimes you leave so you can return stronger. Sometimes you forgive because staying angry is heavier than letting go. And sometimes you create art that says what words never could, reminding everyone, including yourself, that imperfection is beautiful. I think about the mural Mom painted outside my building a lot. Those two figures sitting side by side under a starry sky. They're more than just shapes on a wall. They're a reminder that connection matters, even when it's hard, even when it's messy. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to find our place in the world, and maybe help someone else find theirs along the way. So here's my question for you. When was the last time you chose forgiveness over resentment, or courage over fear? What did it teach you about yourself, and how has it changed the way you live your life? Share your story in the comments below, because transformation doesn't happen in a vacuum. We learn best when we share our journeys and listen to each other's. Stay tuned, because whatever happens next, I promise it won't be easy. And neither will figuring out whether love means holding on or letting go.